I never promised to be your personal prostitute, my wife said after refusing intimacy every night for a full month after our wedding. But I exposed her real reason. Before we go on, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. My name is Alejandro. I'm 31 years old, and exactly 32 days ago, I married the woman I thought was the love of my life. Today I'm asking that this marriage never legally existed. The story began 2 years ago in the cafeteria of the university where we both worked. I was a literature professor. She was an academic events coordinator. Valeria was beautiful, elegant, cultured. We'd talk about Borges and Cortázar for hours. I fell in love with her intelligence before her face, or so I thought. During our dating phase, everything seemed perfect. We'd go out to dinner, go to the movies, share friends. Physical intimacy existed, though always controlled by her. "I'm not ready yet," she'd say when things got more intense. "I want to wait until marriage for something special." I, romantic and traditional, accepted it. I thought it was beautiful that she valued our emotional connection above the physical one. We planned an intimate wedding, 50 guests in a beautiful garden outside Madrid. I spent 5 years of savings on that day. Valeria's dress cost 3,000 euros. The banquet, another 8,000 euros. The flowers, the music, the photographer, everything. It totaled 25,000 euros of my personal savings. Valeria insisted she'd take care of the honeymoon, but in the end, unexpected expenses came up, and they were also on my dime, another 5,000 euros for a week in Tenerife. The ceremony was beautiful. Valeria was radiant. When we said, "I do," I felt my life finally made sense. The guests clapped. We toasted, we danced. My mother cried with happiness. Valeria's father gave me a tight hug and said, "Take good care of my girl." I promised I'd do it. We arrived at the hotel in Tenerife that same night. It was a 5-star resort with ocean views. The bridal suite had rose petals on the bed, champagne on ice, and aromatic candles everywhere. I felt nervous but excited. Finally, after a 2-year wait, we'd share our first night as husband and wife. Valeria came out of the bathroom in pajamas. No lingerie, no sensual robe, flannel pajamas with cat prints. "I'm exhausted," she said, getting under the sheets. It was a very long day. "Good night, Alejandro." I stood by the bed, still in my dress shirt, looking at her in confusion. "Valeria, it's our wedding night." "I know," she answered without even looking at me, already curled up on her side. "And I'm tired. Tomorrow's another day." I tried to get closer to kiss her softly on the shoulder. She pulled away. "Alejandro, please respect my space." I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling rejected, but tried to be understanding. Maybe she really was exhausted. It had been an emotionally long day. I decided to give her space and took a cold shower before lying down as far away from her as possible in that huge bed. The next day, I tried again. "Do you want us to order room service for breakfast?" I asked with a suggestive smile. "No, I'd rather go out. I want to explore the resort," she answered, already dressed in a swimsuit and a sarong, ready to go. There wasn't even a good morning kiss. We spent the day at the beach. Valeria sunbathed. I read a book. At night, we had dinner in the hotel restaurant. The conversation was superficial, like we were casual acquaintances, not newlyweds. Back in the room, she put on her flannel pajamas again. "Valeria, we need to talk," I said. "We've been married for 2 nights, and we haven't even been close." She sighed as if the comment was a nuisance. "Alejandro, not everything in marriage is about intimacy. I need time to adjust. This is new to me, but we've been together for 2 years." I protested. I thought we were waiting for marriage precisely for this moment. "Things change." That was all she said before turning off the light. The rest of the honeymoon was the same. Excursions during the day, rejection at night. We returned home after a week in which there wasn't a single moment of real intimacy between us. I started to feel something was terribly wrong, but I still didn't want to accept the magnitude of the problem. Back in our city, we moved into the apartment I'd bought 6 months prior. 2 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, a balcony overlooking the park. I spent another 10,000 euros furnishing it to Valeria's liking. She chose everything: the couches, the curtains, the dinnerware. I just paid. The nights remained the same. Valeria would go to sleep early, always with some excuse. My head hurts. I have cramps. I had a hard day at work. I try to be patient, understanding, affectionate. I'd cook romantic dinners, buy flowers, put on soft music. Nothing worked. One night, after 3 weeks of marriage, I gathered the courage to confront her directly. Valeria, this isn't normal. We haven't been intimate even once since we got married. I need to understand what's going on. She looked at me with that cold expression I was getting to know too well. Alejandro, I already told you. I need time. Why are you being so pushy? You only married me for that. I didn't answer, feeling guilty even for bringing it up. I married you because I love you. But intimacy is an important part of a marriage. It's the difference between being spouses and being roommates. How vulgar, she said, rolling her eyes. It turns out now I'm just an object to you. The conversation always ended like that. She twisted my words, making me feel like the bad guy. I started to doubt myself. Was I being too pushy, too demanding? Was I really only thinking about myself? The 4th week passed. The 30th day of marriage arrived. That night, I cooked a special dinner, bought an expensive wine, put on a shirt she liked. When Valeria got home from work, the table was set with candles and her favorite dish, mushroom risotto. "What's all this for?" she asked in a neutral tone, without any emotion. "It's our first month of marriage," I said, trying to sound optimistic. "I want to celebrate it with you." She sat down and ate in silence. The wine was left almost untouched in her glass. After dinner, I approached her on the couch. I took her hand. "Valeria, we've been married a month, 30 days, and we haven't shared a single intimate moment. Please, help me understand what's wrong." She pulled her hand away sharply. Her face hardened in a way I'd never seen. "My body, my rules. You don't have the right," she said with a sharp and clear voice. "The fact that we're married doesn't mean you own me or my body. If I'm not ready, I'm not ready." I froze. Not because of the content of her words, which in a sense were correct, but because of the tone, the coldness, the complete lack of empathy for what I was feeling. There was no dialogue, no explanation, not even an attempt at real communication. "I'm not saying I own you," I replied, trying to stay calm. "But marriage implies sharing emotional and physical intimacy. If there's a problem, if something is bothering you, we could talk about it. We can go to therapy, but I need you to give me something more than I don't feel like it." "I don't need therapy," she replied, standing up. "You're the one with a problem if you think you have a right to my body just because we signed a paper. It's not just a paper." My voice finally rose. "It's a commitment. It's a promise to share our lives, to be partners in every way." "Well, I didn't promise to be your personal prostitute." She spat the words with venom. That phrase hit me like a punch to the stomach. I was left speechless, looking at her like she was a complete stranger. And in that moment, I realized the woman I thought I knew, the woman I fell in love with, never really existed. Valeria went to the bedroom and locked the door. I stayed in the living room, sitting on the couch I'd paid for in the apartment I'd bought, surrounded by furniture she'd chosen, and I started to mentally review our whole dating phase with new eyes. The patterns were there, they'd always been there, but I'd chosen not to see them. Every time we went out, I paid. Every gift I bought, every plan, revolved around her preferences. She never asked what I wanted, what I liked, what I needed. And when she postponed intimacy during our dating, I interpreted it as respect for her values. Now I understood it was control, absolute control. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed on the couch thinking. By dawn, I'd made a decision. The next day, I called my best friend, Diego. We'd known each other since high school. He'd been my best man. I needed to talk to someone who knew me well enough to tell me the truth, even if it hurt. We met at a coffee shop near my work. Diego looked at me with concern when he saw me arrive. He probably noticed the dark circles, the messy hair, the wrinkled shirt. I hadn't slept at all. "What happened, man?" he asked directly. "You look terrible." I told him everything, from the wedding night to the confrontation the night before. Diego listened without interrupting. His expression grew increasingly serious. When I finished, he let out a long sigh. "Alejandro, I need to tell you something." He began choosing his words carefully. "During your dating phase with Valeria, several of your friends noticed things we didn't like. The way she always made you change plans, how she never contributed financially to anything, how she made you feel guilty when you expressed a need of your own. Why didn't you guys ever say anything? I asked, feeling a mix of anger and pain. I tried once. Do you remember a year ago when I told you Valeria seemed very controlling? You told me I didn't really know her, that I was just jealous of your happiness. I stopped trying because you were so in love you wouldn't listen. He was right. I remember that conversation. Diego had tried to warn me, and I'd push him away for weeks, annoyed that he didn't support my relationship. What do I do now? I asked, feeling lost. That's your decision, man. But I'll tell you this. A month without intimacy in a new marriage, with all those excuses and that level of coldness, isn't normal. And the way she spoke to you last night, calling you horrible things for expressing a legitimate need in your marriage, that's emotional abuse. The word abuse made me tremble. Do you think she's having an affair? Diego shook his head. I don't know. And honestly, that'd almost be better than the alternative. What alternative? That she used you. That for her marriage was never about love, but for financial security, social status, or just to have someone to support her while she lives her life. His words confirmed the thoughts I'd had all night, but hadn't dared to verbalize. That afternoon, instead of going home, I went to see a lawyer. The law firm was downtown, in an old building with marble floors. The receptionist took me to Mr. Navarro's office, a man in his 50s with gray hair and a piercing gaze. How can I help you, sir? Alejandro Morales, I replied, sitting in the chair across from his desk. I need information about a marriage annulment. Mr. Navarro slightly raised his eyebrows. How long have you been married? 1 month, 31 days to be exact. I explained the whole situation. He took notes occasionally. His professional expression never changed. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. Mr. Morales, there are several grounds for a marriage annulment. The most applicable in your case would be the breach of marital duties and possibly deceit or fraud. If we can prove she never intended to consummate the marriage, the lack of consummation for a full month, especially after the promise during dating that you'd wait until marriage, could be interpreted as premeditated deception. What do I need to proceed? I asked. First, documentation. Any message, email, or evidence showing the pattern of rejection and the reasons given. Second, witnesses if there are any. Third, financial records showing your contributions to the marriage. And fourth, evidence that you tried to solve the problem through communication and that she rejected any type of solution, like couples therapy. How long does the process take? If there's no opposition, it could be relatively quick, 2 or 3 months. If she opposes it, it could extend up to 6 months or more. But given a marriage is so recent and clearly wasn't consummated, you've got a solid case and the costs. My fees are 5,000 euros for a standard annulment case. It could be more if it gets complicated. 5,000 euros more, but it was worth my freedom. I want to proceed, I said firmly. I prepared everything necessary. I left the law firm feeling strangely calm. For the first time in weeks, I felt I was taking back control of my life. That night I got home. Valeria was in the living room, watching TV, eating ice cream straight from the tub. She didn't even look up when I walked in. We need to talk, I said, standing in front of her. If it's about the same thing as last night, I don't have anything else to say, she replied without taking her eyes off the screen. It's not about that. It's about our marriage in general. She finally looked at me with that annoyed expression that had become so familiar. Now what? I want us to see a couples therapist, I said. Not because I actually believed it'd work, but because I needed the evidence of having tried it for the legal case. Valeria let out a short, bitter laugh. Therapy? For what? So a stranger can tell you have the right to pressure me about intimacy. No thanks. Then what do you suggest? Because we can't go on like this. I suggest you mature and understand that marriage isn't just about your needs, she replied, turning her attention back to the TV. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't have gotten married. I took out my phone and discreetly recorded this part of the conversation. Mr. Navarro had advised me to document everything. Valeria, look at me, I said with a serious voice. She turned around, annoyed by the interruption. Do you love me? The question seemed to surprise her. She took too long to answer. Of course, why do you ask? Because it doesn't seem like it. You act like my presence bothers you. We haven't had a real conversation in weeks. We sleep in the same bed, but we could be on different planets. And at any attempt I make to get closer emotionally or physically, you reject me. So I'm asking you again, do you really love me? Her eyes narrowed dangerously. You're accusing me of something, Alejandro. I'm trying to understand what this is that we have because it doesn't look like any marriage I know. Valeria put the ice cream down on the coffee table with a thud and stood up in front of me. Do you know what your problem is, Alejandro? You're too demanding, too needy. You're pathetic with your constant search for validation and affection. Do you want to know the truth? I'm tired of dealing with your insecurities. Her words were like knives, but this time they didn't affect me the same way. I could clearly see the pattern. She deflected, attacked me personally, turned any legitimate problem I brought up into a flaw of mine. All right, I said with a calm I didn't feel. Then I proposed something. Take a few days to really think about what you want out of this marriage. Go to your parents' house or wherever you want. Take the time you need to decide if you really want to be married to me. Are you kicking me out of my own house? She asked in disbelief. This house is in my name, paid for with my money, but I'm not kicking you out. I'm giving you space to think because I need to think too, and I can't do it with this constant tension. I can't believe you're so manipulative, Valeria said, but I could see a trace of concern in her eyes. For the first time, I was setting boundaries. It's not manipulation, it's honesty. We need space. How much time do you need? She crossed her arms. A week. Perfect. A week. And Valeria, when we talk again, I need complete honesty about how you feel, about what you want, about everything. Because if there are no real changes, if there's no way to work on this together, then we'll have to discuss other options. What other options? She asked with a tense voice. Whatever is necessary, so both of us are happy, together or apart. I didn't say the word divorce or annulment, but the message was clear. Valeria paled slightly. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Marriage requires two committed people. If there's only one, it's not a marriage. That night, Valeria packed a suitcase and went to her parents' house. The goodbye was cold. No kisses, no hugs, just to see you in a week. Before she closed the door, I sat on the couch of the now empty and silent apartment. Instead of feeling sadness, I felt relief. For the first time in a month, I could breathe without feeling a constant weight on my chest. The next day, I hired a private investigator. Mr. Navarro had suggested I rule out any possibility of infidelity, since that would strengthen the annulment case if it existed. The investigator, a discreet man named Mendoza, assured me he'd have results in a week. I also used that time to check our shared finances. Valeria had access to a joint account I opened after the marriage, where I deposited my monthly salary for household expenses. I reviewed the transactions and discovered something disturbing. Constant withdrawals at luxury clothing stores, expensive restaurants, spa treatments. Almost all the money I deposited that month she'd spent on things I didn't even know she'd bought. I printed all the account statements. More evidence for the case. On Wednesday of that week, I got a call from Valeria's mother, Mrs. Beatrice. We'd never had a particularly close relationship, but it had always been cordial. Alejandro, I need to talk to you, she said with a tense voice. Valeria told me you kicked her out of the house. I didn't kick her out, Mrs. Beatrice. I suggested she take a few days to think about our marriage, because we have serious problems that need to be resolved. What kind of problems? You've only been married a month. New marriages always have adjustment periods. I decided to be honest. Mrs. Beatrice, with all due respect, these aren't normal adjustment problems. Your daughter and I haven't been intimate even once since the wedding. And when I try to talk about it, she insults me and blames me. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Mrs. Beatrice spoke with a softer voice. Not even once. Not once. Not on the honeymoon. Not after, and every attempt at communication is met with hostility or indifference. Another silence. Alejandro, can I ask you something personal? Sure. Did you try to force anything? The question hurt, but I understood why she asked. Never, Mrs. Beatrice. I'd never do something like that. I've tried conversations. I've suggested therapy. I've tried to create romantic moments, but always with her consent and participation. When she says no, I respect her no. The problem is that it's always no. Without explanation. Without alternatives. Without even acknowledging there's a problem. I'll talk to my daughter, Mrs. Beatrice finally said. This isn't right for either party. A marriage needs communication. Thank you, Mrs. Beatrice. I just wanted to work, but I need Valeria to want it to work too. That night, I got a message from Valeria. My mother has nothing to do with our problems. Leave my family out of this. I replied, your mother called me worried. I was just honest with her. If you don't want your family to know about our problems, help me solve them. There was no response. On Friday, Mendoza, the investigator, called me. Mr. Morales, I have the report. Can we meet? We met at his office. He opened a folder with photos and notes. Your wife isn't having an affair. At least not that I've been able to detect in these 5 days, Mendoza began. But I did discover something interesting. She's been meeting daily with a group of friends at a downtown coffee shop. The conversations I could hear from nearby tables were revealing. He showed me audio recordings with legal authorization for private investigation. He'd managed to capture snippets of conversations. I heard Valeria's voice clearly. I don't understand why he makes such a drama. I have a roof, food, and no one bothers me. Isn't that enough? One of her friends replied, but Vale, eventually you'll have to do it. You know, he's your husband. Valeria laughed. Why? I didn't sign any contract that said that. I can do whatever I want with my body. Besides, honestly, the idea repels me a little. Alejandro is very needy, very emotional. Another voice asked, then why did you marry him? Because he's stable, reliable, and gives me security. I don't have to worry about money or being alone. And my family is happy because I've finally settled down. Everyone wins, except Alejandro, commented one of the friends with a disapproving tone. Alejandro is fine. He got what he wanted. A pretty wife who makes him look good in front of his friends and family. If he could stop being so demanding with intimacy, everything would be perfect. The recording continued, but I'd heard enough. Mendoza looked at me with pity. I'm sorry, Mr. Morales. I know this is hard to hear. Hard was an understatement. It was devastating. Valeria had used me. Marriage for her was just a convenient transaction, a way to secure stability without having to give anything in return. Is this admissible as evidence? I asked with a hollow voice. It depends on the judge and how it's presented, but it definitely shows there was no good faith in entering the marriage on her part. That's marital fraud. I copied all the material and went home. I sat in the dark of my apartment processing it all. The woman I loved never existed. It was an illusion, a performance, and I'd been naive enough to believe in it. But not anymore. The next day, day 6 of our temporary separation, Valeria showed up at the door with her suitcase. I've thought about it, she said without even greeting me. We can try to make this work, but you have to be less pushy with intimacy. Give me time. Eventually it'll happen. I looked at her. This woman who'd promised to love me, honor me, and respect me. And all I saw was someone who saw me as a means to an end. Come in, I said, stepping aside. We need to talk. Valeria walked into the apartment with an air of importance, like she was doing me a favor. Upon returning, she left her suitcase by the door and went straight to the kitchen for water. I watched her move through the space like nothing had changed, as if her words in that coffee shop hadn't revealed the complete truth of our marriage. So, she said, leaning on the counter with a glass in her hand. What do you want to talk about? I sat on the couch. I kept my voice calm. I want to understand something, Valeria. When I proposed a year ago, when we planned our wedding, when you said, I do in front of our families and friends, what did you really expect from this marriage? She blinked clearly. She wasn't expecting that question. Where's this coming from? Just answer the question. What did you expect? Valeria sighed dramatically. I expected a partner, an ally, someone to share my life with. The same as everyone expects. An intimacy, physical connection. Was that part of what you expected, Cher? Her expression hardened again with the same look. Alejandro, I've already told you I need time. A month isn't enough. Apparently not. How much time then? 2 months, 6, a year? Never. I don't know, she answered with frustration. Stop pressuring me. I stood up and walked toward her. I kept my distance but held her gaze. Valeria, a week ago I asked if you love me. You didn't really answer, so I'm asking you again, and I need an honest answer. Do you love me? She looked away toward the window. Several uncomfortable seconds passed. In my own way, she finally said, "What does that mean?" "It means I appreciate you. I value what you have to offer. I care about you. But you don't love me. Not the way a husband and wife should love each other." Her eyes returned to mine. There was defiance in them. "Romantic love is overrated, Alejandro. What we have is more stable, more realistic. We don't need all that dramatic passion to have a good marriage." "A good marriage," I repeated incredulously. "Do you think this is a good marriage where one of us feels rejected, unwanted, used?" "No one is using you," she replied defensively. "You're the one obsessed with physical intimacy, as if it were the only important thing." I took out my phone. "The time has come. I have something to show you." "What?" she asked suspiciously. I played the coffee shop recording. Her voice filled the apartment. "I don't understand why he makes such a drama. I have a roof, food, and no one bothers me. Isn't that enough?" The color drained from Valeria's face. Her eyes widened in shock and then anger. "You were spying on me. I hired an investigator." "Yes, I needed to know if there was someone else. If there was an external reason for your rejection. What I discovered was worse than an affair." "Worse?" "Having a private conversation with my friends is worse than cheating. When that conversation reveals you see me as nothing more than a financial security provider. When you admit our marriage is just a convenient transaction for you. When you say the idea of being intimate with me repels you. Yes, it's worse because it means everything was a lie from the beginning." Valeria put the glass of water on the counter with such force, I thought it'd break. "And what did you expect? That I'd be the perfect wife who cooks, cleans, and is available for you whenever you feel like it? We're in the 21st century. I expected a partner," I said firmly. "Someone who saw me as more than an income source. Someone who actually wanted to build a life with me, not just use my resources to build hers." "This is ridiculous," she said, walking toward her suitcase. "I'm not staying here to listen to this." "Wait," I said. My voice stopped her. "There's something else you need to know." She turned around with her arms crossed defensively. "What?" "Yesterday, I filed for a marriage annulment." The silence that followed was absolute. Valeria looked at me like I'd spoken in another language. "What did you say?" "I filed for an annulment. On Monday, we have a preliminary hearing with the judge." "No, you can't do that." She stuttered, regaining her color in red blotches of anger. "Not without my consent." "Yes, I can, for lack of consummation of the marriage and for marital fraud, the recording you just heard, plus testimonies from friends who noticed manipulative patterns while we were dating, plus the documented fact that there's been no intimacy in 31 days of marriage, plus your refusal to seek professional help. I have a solid case." Valeria collapsed on the couch. Her expression went from anger to shock to something that looked like fear. "Alejandro, wait, can we work this out? I can change." "Change?" I asked bitterly. "Change? What exactly? Are you going to magically start loving me? Are you going to stop seeing me as an ATM? Suddenly you're going to want the intimacy that clearly repels you." "I didn't say it repelled me," she protested weakly. "Yes, you did. I have it on tape. You told your friends the idea of being intimate with me repels you because I'm too needy, too emotional, remember?" She covered her face with her hands. When she spoke, her voice sounded different, smaller. "I didn't mean that. I was venting frustrations with my friends. Everyone says things they don't mean when they're upset. Does everyone admit they got married just for financial security? Does everyone describe their marriage as a convenient transaction where everyone wins, except their partner?" "Please, Alejandro." Tears started rolling down her cheeks for the first time since I'd known her. They looked like real tears, not manipulative ones. "Don't destroy our marriage over some stupid words. We can go to therapy like you suggested. I can try to be more receptive." "Try," I repeated. "You're going to try to love me. You're going to try to be my real wife. Valeria, marriage shouldn't be something you have to force yourself to tolerate." She sobbed. Her perfect mask finally crumbled. "What do you want me to say? That I admit I was wrong? Fine, I was wrong. I married you for the wrong reasons, but that doesn't mean we can't make it work now. Why would you want it to work? I asked, genuinely curious. If I really repel you, if I'm so needy and emotional, why stay? There was a long silence. Finally, Valeria spoke with a barely audible voice. Because I don't want to be a divorced woman at 28. Because my family will be disappointed. Because all our friends will ask what happened. Because it's embarrassing. There was the complete and honest truth. She didn't love me. She didn't want to be with me. She just wanted to avoid the social embarrassment of a failed marriage. I understand, I said with a calm that surprised even myself. But you see, I prefer the embarrassment of admitting I made a mistake to living the rest of my life in an empty marriage with someone who doesn't love me. It's not empty, she argued weakly. We could be friends, companions. There are marriages that work like that. Maybe there are, but I don't want that kind of marriage. I want real love, real intimacy, a real connection, and you clearly can't or won't give me that. Valeria stood up abruptly. And what about all the money you spent? The wedding, the honeymoon, this apartment. Are you going to throw it all away? It's already thrown away, I answered. The difference is now I can cut my losses instead of keep investing in something that will never bear fruit. You're a son of a B. She spat the words with venom. The sweet, vulnerable woman from 2 minutes ago had disappeared, replaced by the cold Valeria I knew so well. All this time, playing the victim, when in reality, you're the one abandoning me. I'm freeing you, I corrected, and I'm freeing myself from a relationship based on lies. My father's going to destroy you, she threatened. His contacts, better lawyers than yours. He'll take everything from you. Your father can try, but the facts are clear. You entered this marriage in bad faith. You never intended to fulfill your marital duties, and you used the marriage as a means to get financial security without giving anything in return. That's fraud. Valeria grabbed her suitcase violently. You're going to regret this, Alejandro. I swear to you. I think I already do, I said calmly. I regret not seeing who you really were 2 years ago. I regret ignoring the red flags. I regret spending 30,000 euros on a wedding for someone who never loved me. But I won't regret ending this before it turns into a decade of misery. She slammed the door, making the walls shake. I stood in the middle of the living room, shaking slightly from the adrenaline, but beneath the shaking was something else. Relief, a huge, overwhelming relief. That night, I called my mother. I've been putting off this conversation. I knew how hard it'd be. My mother adored Valeria, or rather, she adored the idea of Valeria, the polite, pretty, well-bred daughter-in-law. Mom, I need to tell you something. I started when she answered. What's wrong, son? Is everything okay? No, Mom, it's not okay. Valeria and I separated. I've filed for an annulment. There was a long silence on the other end. Annulment? But you've only been married a month. What happened? I told her everything, every painful detail. My mother listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sighed deeply. Alejandro, I'm going to tell you something I should have told you a long time ago. I never liked Valeria at all for you. What? But you always said how wonderful she was. Because I saw you were very happy. I didn't want to ruin it with my doubts, but there were things I noticed, the way she never offered to pay when you went out, how you always gave in during arguments, the way she talked about her future, but never included your dreams in those plans. I thought maybe I was being too critical, that maybe it was just my protective mother nature. Why didn't you say anything? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Because you seemed in love and I thought maybe I was wrong. Parents sometimes see problems where there aren't any because no one is good enough for our kids. But now, hearing all this, I see my instincts were right. I've made a huge mistake, Mom. No, son. You made the mistake of trusting someone who didn't deserve it. But you're fixing it now before it's too late. That's not a mistake. That's bravery. Many people stay in miserable marriages for decades because they're afraid to admit they were wrong. You're facing the truth after just a month. That's admirable. Her words comforted me more than I expected. Dad will be disappointed. Your father will be proud of you for standing up for your own worth. I've already spoken with him. He's completely on your side. After hanging up with my mother, I finally allowed myself to process it all completely. I sat on the balcony with a beer looking at the city lights. I'd spent 2 years in love with an illusion. I'd spent my savings on a farce. I committed my future to someone who never saw me as anything more than a means to an end. But I'd also discovered my own strength. I'd set boundaries. I'd said, no more being used and belittled. I'd chosen my well-being over social pressure or the fear of being alone. Monday would arrive soon, and with it the hearing that had determined the future of this failed marriage. But for the first time in weeks, I felt hopeful. Not for the marriage which was dead and buried in my mind, hopeful for my own future, for the possibility of eventually finding someone who'd truly love me, for taking my life back and building something better. My phone vibrated with a message from Diego. "How are you, man?" I replied, "Better than I've been in a long time." And it was true. Monday arrived with a clear, cold sky. I woke up early, nervous but determined. I put on my best suit, the same one I'd worn for my wedding just 5 weeks ago. The irony didn't escape me. Mr. Navarro had asked us to meet at his office an hour before the hearing to review the final details. When I arrived, I found Diego already waiting for me at reception. I'd asked him to come for moral support. "Ready?" Diego asked, standing up as he saw me walk in. "As ready as I can be," I replied. Mr. Navarro greeted us in his office. On his desk was a thick folder with all the documentation, bank statements, Mendoza's recordings, text messages, written testimonies from friends who'd witnessed Valeria's behavior while we were dating. "Mr. Morales, before we go into the courtroom, I need to prepare you for what might happen," the lawyer began. "The other party has legal representation. Mr. Vargas is known for being aggressive in his tactics. He'll try to paint you as an abusive, controlling, possibly even violent husband. It's important you stay calm, no matter what they say." "Understand," I nodded. "It's also likely they'll bring their own witnesses, her family, maybe friends willing to lie under oath. Be prepared to hear distorted versions of events you remember completely differently." "And our evidence?" I asked. "Are the recordings admissible?" "Yes, recordings obtained by the private investigator in public spaces are admissible. Plus, the fact that you documented your attempts at communication and your suggestion of couples therapy that she rejected significantly strengthens your case. But get ready, this won't be easy." We arrived at the courthouse at 9:30. The hearing was scheduled for 10. In the hallway outside the courtroom, I saw Valeria for the first time since she left our apartment. She was accompanied by her parents, Mrs. Beatriz and Mr. Fernando, her lawyer, a man in his 50s with an expensive suit and a stern expression. Valeria looked different. She wore a conservative outfit, looking almost fragile. Her makeup was minimal, her eyes slightly red as if she'd been crying. It was a calculated transformation, designed to generate sympathy. Our eyes met briefly. In her eyes, I saw something that surprised me. Real fear. Maybe she was finally understanding the consequences of her actions. Mr. Fernando saw me and walked toward me with firm steps. Diego immediately stood by my side, ready to intervene if necessary. "Alejandro," Mr. Fernando said with a controlled but tense voice, "I don't know what the hell you think you're doing, but this is going to end very badly for you." "Mr. Fernando, with all due respect, this is between Valeria and me. You're the one dragging her to court," he retorted, raising his voice a bit. "A month, one damn month of marriage, and you already want to annul it like it's a cell phone contract. A month in which your daughter lied to me, used me, and treated me with contempt," I answered firmly. "A month in which I discovered the marriage was a farce from the beginning. My daughter is a decent woman," Mrs. Beatriz chimed in, approaching as well. "You're the one defaming her with ridiculous accusations." "They aren't accusations, Mrs. Beatriz. They're documented facts, and soon the judge will see all the evidence." Mr. Vargas approached, interrupting the conversation. "Mr. Morales, I suggest you stop talking to my clients. Any further communication could harm you in the hearing." "I don't have a problem with that," I replied, turning to walk away. "Alejandro." Valeria's voice stopped me. I turned to see her standing a few feet away, flanked by her parents and her lawyer. "Please, let's not do this. We can solve our problems in private without involving the courts." "We had a month to solve our problems in private," I said. "You chose not to do it." "Because I needed time," she insisted, her voice breaking slightly. "Good acting. I didn't know my husband was going to abandon me after 30 days for not being available fast enough for him. There was the narrative they were trying to sell. Me as the impatient, insensitive husband. Her as the pressured victim. That's a very convenient version of events, I said coldly. Too bad the evidence tells a different story. Before she could answer, the courtroom doors opened. The bailiff motioned for us to go in. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. The judge, a man in his 60s with completely white hair and a serious expression, was already sitting behind the bench. His name, according to the plaque in front of him, was Judge Hernandez. Case number 20,573, the clerk announced. Morales versus Morales, request for marriage annulment. The judge reviewed some documents before speaking. I've read the preliminary petitions from both parties. This is a hearing to determine if there's sufficient merit to proceed with the annulment or if the case should be dismissed. Mr. Navarro, present your argument. Mr. Navarro stood up. Your Honor, this case is quite simple. My client, Mr. Alejandro Morales, married Mrs. Valeria Morales 35 days ago. During that time, the marriage hasn't been consummated even once despite Mr. Morales' multiple attempts to address this situation. Furthermore, we have evidence showing that Mrs. Morales entered the marriage in bad faith with fraudulent intentions, seeing it primarily as a financial transaction rather than a genuine romantic union. Those are serious accusations, Counselor, the judge said, looking toward Valeria and her lawyer. Mr. Vargas, your response. Mr. Vargas stood up, adjusting his tie. Your Honor, what we have here is a case of an impatient, controlling husband who can't accept that his wife needs time to adjust to marriage. Mrs. Morales is a woman who values emotional connection above the physical, something completely understandable and within her rights. Instead of respecting her boundaries and working with her in an understanding way, Mr. Morales has harassed her, pressured her, and now seeks to punish her legally for exercising autonomy over her own body. Your Honor, Mr. Navarro intervened, we have recordings that completely contradict that narrative. The judge raised his hand. We'll get to the evidence first. Mr. Morales approached the stand. I stood up with my legs shaking slightly and walked to the front. The judge studied me for a moment. Mr. Morales, explain to me in your own words why you're seeking an annulment of your marriage barely a month after the ceremony. I took a deep breath. Your Honor, I married Valeria because I believed I loved her and she loved me. During our dating phase, she insisted on waiting until marriage for certain aspects of our relationship, something I fully respected. But from the moment we got married, there's been a total, constant rejection of any kind of intimacy, accompanied by hostility when I try to discuss the topic. I'm not talking about pressuring her physically. I'd never do that. I'm talking about having conversations about our marriage, about our expectations, about building a life together. Every attempt has been met with indifference or insults. And when did you decide an annulment was necessary? The judge asked. When I hired a private investigator to rule out an affair and instead discovered Valeria confessing to her friends she married me for financial security, not love, that the idea of being intimate with me repels her, that she sees me as needy and emotional. In that moment, I understood there was never a real marriage, just a transaction where I was the only one investing emotionally. Does the defense wish to cross-examine the witness? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Vargas stood up and walked toward me. Mr. Morales, is it true that during your honeymoon you tried to force intimacy with your wife despite her objections? No, I replied firmly. I never tried to force anything. I expressed confusion and disappointment when she rejected any kind of advance, but I always respected her no. And is it true you hired a private investigator to spy on my client without her knowledge or consent? I hired an investigator to determine if there were external factors affecting our marriage. It's a legal, common practice in cases of marital problems. Don't you consider that a violation of trust? I consider it a bigger violation of trust to marry someone, knowing you never intended to be a real wife, but just a financial dependent. Objection, yelled Mr. Vargas. The witness is speculating on my client's intentions. Sustained, the judge said, "Mr. Morales, limit yourself to answering the questions without adding further comments." The cross-examination continued for another 20 minutes. Mr. Vargas tried to paint me as controlling, obsessed with intimacy, and insensitive to Valeria's emotional needs. I stayed calm, answering every question with specific facts and without emotion. Finally, the judge called Valeria to the stand. She walked to the front with small steps. Her hands shook slightly as she swore to tell the truth. "Mrs. Morales," her lawyer began with a soft tone, "why did you marry Alejandro?" "Because I loved him," Valeria replied with a soft, vulnerable voice. "I thought we were going to build a beautiful life together." "And what happened after the wedding?" "Alejandro completely changed. He became demanding, pushy every night. He expected me to be intimate with him, no matter how I felt. When I asked for time to adjust, he'd get mad. He'd accuse me of not loving him. He made me feel guilty for having boundaries." "Did your husband ever try to force you physically?" Valeria hesitated. Her eyes briefly met mine before looking away. "There were moments I felt pressured, moments I wasn't sure if I could say no. It was a blatant lie, but told with such conviction that I saw the judge's expression grow more serious. "Your Honor," Mr. Navarro intervened, "I request permission to present evidence that directly contradicts Mrs. Morales' testimony." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Mr. Navarro played the coffee shop recording. Valeria's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. "I don't understand why he makes such a drama. I have a roof, food, and no one bothers me. Isn't that enough?" I watched Valeria's face pale. Her parents exchanged shocked looks. Mr. Vargas leaned in to whisper something urgent in her ear. The recording continued, every word destroying the narrative they tried to build. When it ended, the silence in the room was absolute. "Mrs. Morales," the judge said with a cold voice, "is it your voice on the recording?" "I was upset," Valeria stuttered. "I was venting with my friends. It didn't really represent how I feel." "So, were you lying to your friends, or are you lying now under oath?" the judge asked directly. Valeria opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Mr. Navarro seized the moment. "Your Honor, we also have documentation of Mrs. Morales' expenses during the marriage. Almost €5,000 in personal purchases, spa, luxury restaurants, all charged to accounts paid exclusively by my client. In addition, written testimonies from Mr. Morales' friends who noticed manipulative patterns while they were dating." The judge reviewed the documents Mr. Navarro handed him. His expression grew increasingly serious. "Mrs. Morales, did you enter this marriage intending to fulfill the marital duties typical of a matrimonial union?" Valeria looked at her lawyer, who could only shrug slightly. "I thought eventually," she began weakly. "That's not what I asked." The judge interrupted. "I asked if you intended at the moment of getting married to be a wife in the full sense of the word, or if you saw the marriage primarily as a financial convenience agreement." Tears started rolling down Valeria's cheeks, but this time they didn't generate sympathy. They just confirmed the truth. "I don't know," she finally whispered. The judge closed the folder in front of him with a thud. "I've heard enough." Judge Hernandez took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly with a handkerchief, a gesture that seemed to give him time to organize his thoughts. The silence in the room was so thick I could hear Valeria's nervous breathing from where I was sitting. "In my 27 years as a family judge," he finally began, putting his glasses back on, "I've seen all kinds of failed marriages, infidelity, abuse, incompatibility, but rarely have I seen a case as clear of marital fraud as the one presented before me today." Mr. Vargas stood up quickly. "Your Honor, with all due respect, fraud is a very strong word. My client simply needed time to—" "Mr. Vargas," the judge interrupted with a firm voice. "I've heard the recording where your client admits in her own words that she got married for financial security and not for love. I've seen the bank records showing excessive expenses on personal luxury items, all paid by the plaintiff. I've read the testimonies of multiple witnesses about manipulative patterns while dating, and I've heard your client contradict herself repeatedly under oath." Valeria was sobbing openly. Now her mother had an arm around her shoulders. Mr. Fernando's face was red with contained rage. The institution of marriage, the judge continued, is based on the good faith of both parties. When a person enters a marriage with fraudulent intentions, using the other party as a means to obtain economic benefits, with no real intention to fulfill the basic commitments of a marital union, that constitutes fraud, and fraud invalidates the marriage contract. My heart was beating so fast, I thought everyone in the room could hear it. Mr. Navarro lightly touched my arm, a reassuring gesture. Therefore, the judge banged his gavel. I declare there is sufficient merit to proceed with the annulment. The marriage between Alejandro Morales and Valeria Morales is dissolved as if it never legally existed. Additionally, I order that no, Valeria yelled, standing up abruptly. This isn't fair. I'm his wife. The judge looked at her sternly. Mrs. Morales, I suggest you sit down immediately, or I'll have you removed from my courtroom. He promised to take care of me, Valeria continued, ignoring the warnings of both the judge and her own lawyer, who was trying to quiet her. We made vows. He can't just decide they don't count because he didn't get what he wanted when he wanted it. Mrs. Morales, the judge's voice was now steel. You made those vows in bad faith. Marriage vows aren't a one-sided contract where you get all the benefits without any responsibility. Now sit down, or you'll be removed by force. Mrs. Beatriz finally managed to pull Valeria into her seat, where she collapsed crying hysterically. Her father looked devastated, probably processing for the first time who his daughter really was. As I was saying, the judge continued. Besides the annulment, I order the following. Mrs. Morales must return all items of significant value acquired with Mr. Morales's funds during the month of marriage or their cash equivalent. This includes, but isn't limited to, jewelry, designer clothes, and any other item exceeding 1,000 euros in individual value. Mr. Vargas stood up again. Your Honor, that's excessive. My client, your client, the judge interrupted coldly, spent almost 5,000 euros of her husband's money on personal luxuries, while refusing to fulfill any aspect of her marital obligations. If you consider that excessive, Counselor, I suggest you reconsider your definition of the word. Furthermore, all gifts given during the marriage under false pretenses must be returned or their value compensated. I turned a bit to look at Valeria. Her face was completely distorted. Tears were ruining her carefully applied makeup. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Mr. Morales, the judge continued, will retain exclusive ownership of the apartment acquired before the marriage, as well as all furniture and belongings. Mrs. Morales has 5 days to remove any personal belongings from the residence under the supervision of a bailiff. I'll consider it necessary, Your Honor, Mr. Navarro said immediately. Additionally, given the marriage is annulled for fraud, Mrs. Morales has no right to alimony or any other form of support. Each party leaves with what they brought to the marriage. Nothing more, nothing less. Mr. Fernando finally found his voice. With all due respect, Your Honor, my daughter has a right to— Your daughter, the judge interrupted coldly, has a right to exactly nothing, Mr. Fernando. She entered this marriage in bad faith, as her own recorded confession proves. If you believe that gives her any right over Mr. Morales's resources, then you're as mistaken as she is. The blow was devastating. I saw Mr. Fernando sink into his seat defeated. Mrs. Beatriz cried in silence, probably realizing her daughter's perfect image had been completely destroyed. Finally, the judge said, I order Mrs. Morales to cover Mr. Morales's legal costs related to this process, which according to the documents presented amount to 5,000 euros. She has 30 days to make the full payment. I don't have 5,000 euros, Valeria exclaimed between sobs. Then I suggest you sell some of those luxury items you bought with your ex-husband's money, the judge replied, without sympathy, or that you get a job. This court has no further business regarding this case. The annulment is effective immediately. Case closed. The gavel banged with absolute finality. I sat for a moment processing what had just happened. I was legally free. It was like the marriage had never existed, like Valeria had never been my wife. Mr. Navarro patted my shoulder. Congratulations, Mr. Morales. It couldn't have gone better. Diego hugged me tightly. You did it, man. You're free. On the other side of the room, Valeria was practically dragged out by her parents. Her lawyer gathered his documents with a defeated expression. Before leaving, Valeria turned to look at me one last time. Her face was a mask of resentment, pain, and shame. I hope you're happy, she said with a hoarse voice. You've destroyed my life. The words didn't affect me like they would have a month ago. They didn't awaken guilt or doubts or a desire to apologize or fix it. Now, after everything I discovered, I only saw someone who never took responsibility for her own actions. I didn't destroy your life, Valeria, I replied calmly. You destroyed yours, believing you could use people without consequences. I hope you learned something from this, but honestly, I doubt it. She opened her mouth to answer, but her father pulled her gently toward the door. Let's go, daughter. You've done enough damage for today. I watched them leave, a family crumbling under the weight of the truth. Part of me felt sorry for Valeria's parents, especially Mrs. Beatrice, who probably never really knew who her daughter had become. But another part of me acknowledged they'd also contributed to the problem, raising someone who believed she could manipulate her way through life. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright midday light. The fresh air felt clean, refreshing. Diego insisted we go out to eat to celebrate. And even though I didn't feel particularly festive, I agreed. I needed company. I needed to process everything with someone who knew me. At the restaurant, after ordering, Diego raised his glass of water to freedom and having the courage to recognize a mistake and fix it. We toasted, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something like genuine peace. And now what? Diego asked after taking a sip. Now, I repeated, thinking about the question. Now I get my life back. I rebuild my savings. I spend time with people who truly value me. And eventually, when I'm ready, maybe I'll try again to find someone who truly loves me, not just for what I can provide. You're going to be fine, man, Diego said with certainty. In fact, I think you're going to be better than fine. This experience, as horrible as it was, taught you to recognize red flags. It taught you your own worth. Next time you won't settle for less than you deserve. He was right. I learned painful but valuable lessons about the importance of listening to my instincts, about not ignoring the signs just because I was in love with the idea of someone, about my own worth as a person, not just as a provider. That night, I returned alone to my apartment. For the first time in over a month. It was truly mine again. There was no tension in the air, no rejection waiting for me, no silent hostility, just peace. I walked through the rooms, visualizing what my life would be like from now on. The guest room Valeria had filled with her clothes could become an office. The living room space she dominated could be reorganized to my preferences. The whole apartment could finally reflect who I was, not who she wanted me to be. My phone rang. It was my mother. How did everything go, son? She asked anxiously as soon as I answered. We won, Mom. The annulment was approved. It's like the marriage never existed. I heard her sigh of relief. Thank God. How do you feel? Honestly, relieved, free, a little sad about the lost time and money, but mostly relieved. Money can be recovered, son, and time. Though we can't recover it, at least you didn't lose more than a month compared to a whole life in a miserable marriage. I'd say you came out well. We talked for almost an hour. My mother shared stories of acquaintances who'd stayed in unhappy marriages for years, even decades, out of fear or social pressure. In comparison, my situation didn't seem so terrible. I'd identified the problem quickly and acted decisively. That was something to be proud of, not ashamed of. After hanging up, I made myself a simple dinner. While I ate alone at my dining table, I reflected on all the tense dinners with Valeria, the superficial conversations, the constant feeling of walking on eggshells. This solitary dinner was infinitely more pleasant. The following days were a mix of practical tasks and emotional healing. On Friday, with a bailiff present, Valeria came to collect her belongings. She arrived with her father and two brothers I didn't know very well. The interaction was cold, professional, with no unnecessary words. She packed her clothes, her shoes, her bath products. She tried to take some decorative items she'd chosen, but the bailiff consulted the list I'd prepared beforehand and informed her those items had been paid for by me and, therefore, belonged to me. Alejandro, please. Valeria tried one last time when she was about to leave. At least let me keep the necklace you gave me for my birthday. It has sentimental value. I looked at the pearl necklace she was holding, the one that had cost 2,000 euros. Sentimental value. I repeated, really, or resale value? She didn't answer. She just dropped it on the coffee table with a dramatic gesture. When they finally left, I closed the door and leaned against it, exhausted but satisfied. This stage was over. The apartment was completely mine again. The following Monday, I went to a jeweler to appraise everything Valeria had left behind. The pearl necklace, some diamond earrings, a gold bracelet. The total was almost 4,500 euros. It wasn't everything I'd spent on her, but it was something. I decided to sell it all. I didn't want physical reminders of that chapter in my life. With the money from the jewelry, plus the money I'd recover when Valeria paid the legal costs, I could get back a decent part of what was lost, not all, but enough to start rebuilding my savings. I also decided to see a therapist, not because there was anything wrong with me, but because I recognized I needed to process this whole experience properly. I needed to understand why I'd ignored the signs, why I'd allowed my desire to be loved to cloud my judgment. My first session with Dr. Jimenez was eye-opening. She helped me see patterns in my relationship history, tendencies to prioritize others' needs over mine, to confuse being needed with being loved. Alejandro, she told me during our third session, what you experienced wasn't just a failed marriage, it was emotional abuse. She manipulated you, used you, and then made you feel guilty for having legitimate needs. Recognizing that doesn't make you weak, it makes you aware. And awareness is the first step to avoid repeating patterns. Her words freed me from a residual guilt I didn't even know I carried. It hadn't been my fault. I hadn't been demanding or insensitive for expressing that I expected intimacy and a real connection in my marriage. Those were completely normal and healthy expectations. Weeks passed, the sharp pain turned into a dull ache, and finally, into just an unpleasant memory. I started going out more with friends, picking up hobbies I'd neglected during my relationship with Valeria. I started reading for pleasure again, not just the academic texts required for my job. I joined a hiking club. I started cooking elaborate meals just because I liked to, without worrying if someone else would appreciate them. 2 months after the annulment, I ran into an old college classmate, Claudia, at a bookstore. We'd been close friends during our college years, but we'd lost touch after graduation. We grabbed coffee, caught up on our lives. When I briefly mentioned the annulled marriage, she listened without judging. "Do you know what I like about you, Alejandro?" She said after hearing my summarized story. "That you recognized something was wrong and acted. A lot of people would have stayed suffering in silence, convincing themselves it was the right thing to do. You had the courage to say, 'No, I deserve better than this.'" Her words comforted me in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't romantic attraction. I wasn't ready for that yet. It was simply the warmth of being seen, appreciated, and validated for who I really was. We exchanged numbers and agreed to see each other again. No pressure, no expectations, just two old friends reconnecting. Every night, back in my apartment, I'd lean out on the balcony with a beer, looking at the city lights like I'd done so many times during the dark days of the marriage. But now everything looked different, brighter, more full of possibilities. My phone vibrated with a message from Claudia. "Thanks for coffee today. I was really glad to see you and know you're doing well. You're a good person, Alejandro. Don't let a bad experience make you forget that." I smiled, wrote a simple thank you reply, and put my phone away. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time that didn't scare me, it excited me. I'd survived what I thought was the worst moment of my life. I'd found my voice, my worth, my strength. And now, free from the chains of a fraudulent marriage, I was ready to build a life that was truly mine. 6 months after the annulment, my life had found a completely different rhythm than what I'd known during my time with Valeria. It was a rhythm built on solid foundations of authenticity, instead of appearances of self-respect, instead of desperate complacency. The apartment had completely transformed. I hired an interior designer not to impress anyone, but simply because I wanted a space that genuinely reflected who I was. The walls now displayed artwork I liked, not appropriate pieces Valeria had insisted on because they seemed more sophisticated. My library took up the whole living room wall filled with books I actually read, not expensive decorations that only served to impress visitors. My savings were slowly recovering. Valeria had paid the 5,000 euros in legal costs after 2 months of delays, probably pressured by her parents, who didn't want to face further legal consequences. The money from the sold jewelry also helped, but more important than the financial recovery was the emotional recovery. Therapy with Dr. Jimenez continued to be invaluable. During our sessions, I discovered patterns that went back way before Valeria, a tendency to confuse being needed with being loved, a deep fear of disappointing others that made me ignore my own needs, a subconscious belief that I had to earn love through constant sacrifice. Real love, Dr. Jimenez explained to me during a particularly eye-opening session, doesn't require you to lose yourself. It doesn't require constant sacrifice without reciprocity. Real love makes you feel more like yourself, not less. Those words frequently resonated in my mind. I'd spent 2 years with Valeria, feeling less and less like myself, smaller and smaller, more and more questioned. Now, I simply felt I was expanding back into who I really was. My friendship with Claudia had grown naturally during those months. We saw each other every 2 weeks to grab coffee or dinner, sometimes accompanied by other friends, sometimes alone. She was a history professor at a private university, passionate about her job, with a dry sense of humor that made me truly laugh. But we consciously kept things in the friend zone. I wasn't ready for more, and she fully respected that. No rush, she told me one night, when I admitted I felt pressured by well-meaning friends who wanted to set me up. You just got out of something traumatic. Give yourself time to completely heal before inviting anyone else into your life. Her understanding was refreshing. There were no ulterior motives or attempts to push me into the next relationship. Just genuine friendship. At work, there were also positive changes. Without the constant emotional drain of my failed marriage, my energy and my focus had returned. I published 2 academic articles in prestigious journals. I was offered to direct a new contemporary literature program that really excited me. I'd even started writing a book, something I'd put off for years because I didn't have time. One October afternoon, I got an unexpected call from Mrs. Beatriz, Valeria's mother. We hadn't spoken since the hearing. Alejandro, she started with a tense voice. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to call you. Is everything okay? I asked, genuinely concerned despite everything. Yes, well, relatively. I wanted to apologize. Fernando and I have spent these months reflecting a lot on what happened, on how we raised Valeria, on the signs we ignored, on how we treated you during that whole process. She paused as if gathering courage. You were honest with us from the start when my daughter accused you of being the problem. We believed her without questioning because she's our daughter, but after hearing that recording, we had to face the truth. Valeria wasn't raised to value people beyond what they could give her. That's our fault, not yours. Her words surprised me. Mrs. Beatriz. I don't. She interrupted softly. Let me finish. Valeria is in therapy now. She's living alone for the first time, working a job she doesn't like, but that pays her bills. She's learning lessons she should have learned years ago. And though it's painful to watch her suffer, Fernando and I recognize it's necessary. I'm glad to hear she's getting help, I said sincerely. I also wanted you to know that we as parents covered the 5,000 euros in legal costs she owed you. It was our failure as parents that created this situation. The least we can do is make sure you don't suffer more financial losses for our mistakes. I already received it, I reminded her. Valeria paid it months ago. I know. We gave her the money to give to you, but we felt you deserved to know it came from us, not her. She hasn't fully accepted her responsibility yet, though we hope someday she will. After hanging up, I stayed in silence processing the conversation. It didn't change anything fundamentally, But there was something comforting in knowing that at least Valeria's parents were facing reality. Maybe with time and therapy, Valeria would too, but that was no longer my problem or my responsibility. In November, Claudia invited me to a St. Martin's Day dinner with her family. No pressure, she clarified immediately. My family is huge and loud. We always invite friends who don't have plans, but if you'd rather have a quiet day, I totally get it. I accepted, and the experience was eye-opening. Claudia's family was exactly as she described it: big, loud, affectionate. There were heated political arguments, followed by laughter, kids running everywhere, multiple generations sharing stories. It was chaotic but warm, authentic in a way the carefully orchestrated gatherings of my family or Valeria's had never been. During dinner, Claudia's father, Mr. Manuel, a man in his 60s with completely gray hair and kind eyes, sat next to me. Claudia told us a bit about your situation, he said directly, but without malice. Marriage annulment after a month. Yes, I confirmed, bracing myself for judgment or pity. My brother went through something similar years ago, Mr. Manuel continued. He married a woman who turned out to be in love with his bank account, not him. It lasted 2 years before he realized it. He always said his only regret was not acting after the first month, when he already knew something was wrong. So from my perspective, you made the right decision at the right time. His simple and direct words freed me from a residue of shame I didn't even know I still carried. There was nothing to be ashamed of in recognizing a mistake and fixing it quickly. December arrived with its usual frenzy of festivities. My mother insisted I spend Christmas with the family. During dinner, my Aunt Rosara, who'd always been my favorite for her brutal honesty, raised her glass. A toast, she announced, to Alejandro, who this year taught us that having the courage to say no more is just as important as having the courage to say I do. The whole table toasted, and I felt a genuine warmth I hadn't experienced in a long time. My family, unlike the Morales family, supported me unconditionally. After dinner, my mother pulled me aside. How are you? Really, son, not the version you tell everyone. How are you? I thought seriously about the question before answering. I'm fine, Mom. Really, some days are harder than others. Moments when I wonder if I acted too fast or if I should have tried harder, but then I remember the recording, Valeria's words, how I felt every day during that month. And I know I made the right decision. In the future, do you plan to try again someday? Someday, I replied, when I'm ready, when I've fully healed, when I can enter a relationship as a whole person, not as someone looking for another to complete him. My mother hugged me tightly. That's my smart son. January, a year after my wedding to Valeria, I decided to do something symbolic. I took my wedding ring I'd kept in a drawer since the annulment and sold it at a jewelry store that bought gold. It wasn't worth much, 300 euros, but it wasn't about the money. It was about fully letting go of that chapter. With that money, plus a bit more of my savings, I bought a plane ticket to a place I'd always wanted to visit, the Alhambra in Granada, and then a tour around Andalusia. During my marriage to Valeria, I'd postponed that trip because she wasn't interested in ancient history and preferred beach and shopping destinations. Now, free from those restrictions, I could finally chase my own dreams. The trip was transformative. Standing before the beauty of the Nasrid palaces, surrounded by history, I felt a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. Life was vast, full of possibilities, and I was free to explore them all. During the trip, I met other solo travelers. We shared stories, hiked challenging trails together. We laughed at our respective mistakes and lessons learned. A French woman named Margot, who was also recovering from a toxic relationship, told me something that stuck with me. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. When you can finally think of your ex without feeling anything, good or bad, then you'll know you've fully healed. I returned from that trip renewed, with a broader perspective on my own experience. What Valeria did to me was terrible, but it wasn't unique. Millions of people faced similar betrayals, relationships based on lies, marriages that turned out to be illusions. The difference was what you chose to do with that experience. Could you let it define you, embitter you, make you afraid to trust again? Or could you use it as a lesson, as a catalyst to know yourself better and set stronger boundaries? I chose the latter. In February, Claudia confessed to me during one of her usual coffees that she'd started developing romantic feelings for me. But she quickly added, "I don't expect anything. Our friendship is too important to risk if you're not ready. I just wanted to be honest with you." Her honesty moved me deeply, and reflecting on my own feelings, I realized I'd also started seeing her differently, but something was holding me back. Not fear exactly, but a healthy caution. "Give me a little more time," I asked her. "Not because I don't care about you, but because I want to make sure I can enter into something new in a fair way for both of us, without carrying all the baggage of what I lived with Valeria." "Take all the time you need," she replied with an understanding smile. "I'm not going anywhere." That conversation led me to a crucial session with Dr. Jimenez. "How do I know when I'm ready?" I asked her. "How do I know I won't repeat the same mistakes?" "You'll never have absolute guarantees," she answered wisely. "But there are signs. Can you think of Valeria without feeling consuming rage? Have you identified the patterns that led you to ignore the red flags? Do you have clear boundaries about what's acceptable and what's not in a relationship? Can you imagine a relationship where your needs also matter, not just your partner's?" I reflected on each question. Yes, I could think of Valeria with something close to indifference now. An occasional annoyance for the lost time and money, but not the consuming fury of the first months. Yes, I'd identified my patterns thanks to therapy. Yes, I had much clearer boundaries now, and yes, I could imagine a healthy relationship where both people contributed equally. "I think," I said slowly, "that I'm almost ready." "Not entirely, almost." "Then you're in the right place." Dr. Jimenez smiled. "Almost ready is often the perfect moment. It means you've done the work, but you recognize that healing is continuous." In March, 15 months after my disastrous wedding, I invited Claudia to dinner. Not one of our usual casual coffees, but a real dinner with the explicit intention of it being a date. "Are you sure?" she asked when I invited her. Her voice mixed hope with caution. "I'm sure," I replied, "or at least as sure as I can be. I want to try this with you properly." Dinner was different from any experience I'd had with Valeria. Real conversations where both shared equally, genuine laughter, plans that took both of our wishes into account. When I walked her to her car at the end of the night, I leaned in to kiss her softly. It was a kiss full of possibilities, of new beginnings, of hope. "Thanks for waiting for me," I told her. "Thanks for doing the work to be ready," she replied. Things with Claudia progressed slowly and intentionally, without an immediate merging of lives, without rushed moves or premature commitments. Just two people genuinely getting to know each other, building something solid on honest foundations. When I finally told her the whole story about Valeria, several months after starting our relationship, she listened without judging. "I can see why that experience scarred you," she said thoughtfully. "But I can also see how it made you stronger, more aware, some of the things I value most about you. Your clarity on your boundaries, your insistence on honest communication, your willingness to have hard conversations right away instead of letting them rot. All those come from what you learned." She was right. Valeria had hurt me deeply, but inadvertently, she'd taught me invaluable lessons about my own worth, about the importance of reciprocity in relationships, about not confusing love with unilateral sacrifice. 2 years after the annulment, I was standing on my apartment balcony again, but this time I wasn't alone. Claudia was by my side, her hand intertwined with mine. We just returned from meeting her extended family in Guadalajara, a trip that had been everything a family experience should be. Warm, welcoming, authentic. "What are you thinking about?" Claudia asked, gently squeezing my hand. "About how different everything is now," I replied honestly. 2 years ago, I was standing here feeling miserable, trapped, alone despite being married. Now I'm here with you, and I feel more accompanied than ever. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked with a careful voice. "Going through all that with Valeria?" I thought seriously about the question. "I regret the pain. I regret the lost money. I regret not seeing the signs sooner, but I don't regret the whole experience because it brought me here. It taught me who I don't want to be and what I won't tolerate, and eventually it brought me to you." She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. Thanks for letting me be part of your life. Thanks to you for being someone who makes my life worth sharing, I replied. A few weeks later, I got an unexpected message from Valeria. It was the first one since the annulment almost 2 years ago. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I'm in therapy, and my therapist suggested I do an apology process with the people I hurt. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know I now understand what I did. Using you was cruel. Marrying you without really loving you was unforgivable. You've been more honest and decent with me than I ever was with you. I hope you found the happiness I denied you. You deserve it. I read the message several times. It sounded genuine, very different from the accusations and defenses of 2 years ago. I showed it to Claudia, who read it thoughtfully. Are you going to reply? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me just wants to leave it in the past. Another part feels that maybe a proper closure would be good for both of us. There's no wrong answer, Claudia said. Do what you feel is best for you. After thinking about it for a day, I replied briefly, thanks for your honesty. I wish you the best in your healing process. Take care. Simple, no resentment, but also no invitation for further communication. It was enough. Today, 3 years after that disastrous wedding night, I'm in a place I never imagined possible during the dark days of that failed marriage. Claudia and I are engaged, but we took our time getting here. We've been living together for 6 months, and every day confirms this time is different. This time it's real, no rejections, no games, no hidden agendas. Just two people who genuinely value each other, who contribute equally to the relationship, who communicate honestly, even when it's hard. We argue occasionally, like all couples, but they're productive arguments where both listen and look for solutions, not fights where one manipulates and the other gives in out of exhaustion. My finances fully recovered. I even managed to save more than I had before meeting Valeria. The book I started writing during my healing was published last year, a novel about second chances and the courage to start over. It wasn't a bestseller, but the reviews were positive, and it meant a lot to me to have completed it. At work, I was promoted to director of the literature department, a position that allows me to influence the curriculum and mentor young professors. Satisfying in ways simple teaching never was. My family is happy for me, genuinely happy to see me with someone who treats me well. My mother adores Claudia, not because she's perfect or impressive, but because it's clear she makes me happy and respects me. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd ignored the signs, if I'd stayed in that marriage, convincing myself it'd eventually get better. I'd probably be a miserable man now. My savings depleted, my self-esteem destroyed, precious years of my life wasted on someone who never valued me. Instead, I made the hard choice. I faced the social embarrassment of an annulled marriage. After a month, I endured comment from acquaintances insinuating I was the problem, that I hadn't tried hard enough. I spent money on lawyers and lost more money in the process, but I got back something much more valuable. My life, my dignity, my future. The most important lesson I learned from this whole experience is that self-love isn't selfishness. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty, and acknowledging you made a mistake isn't a failure. It's wisdom. I deserve to be loved the way I love. I deserve reciprocity, honesty, respect. And anyone who can't or won't give that doesn't deserve a place in my life, no matter how perfect they look on paper. Valeria taught me what I don't want in a relationship. Claudia is teaching me every day what a healthy relationship can truly be. And I, through the hard work of therapy and self-reflection, learned to be the partner I deserve to have. My wife denied me intimacy for a full month after we got married. When I confronted her, she told me I had no right to her body, so I filed for an annulment. It was the best decision I could have ever made. Have you ever had to make the hard decision to walk away from a relationship you knew was toxic, even when everyone expected you to stick it out? Have you experienced that freedom that comes from finally setting boundaries and respecting yourself?